You are looking for a dress watch and you cannot decide if you should buy a Japanese Citizen Tsuyosa automatic watch or a Swiss-made Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, then you found the right video. In this video I will analyze all the differences between the Tsuyosa versus the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. This is not a hands-on video, but in this comparison I will try to compare all color and design variations of the two watch collections, so you get a good overview of the Tsuyosa and PRX collection. First I will talk about all the design differences between the Citizen Tsuyosa versus the Tissot PRX watches, and then I will compare all the technical details and the movements. Before I start, I want to ask you to consider using my shopping links below in the video description. You do not have any downside by using them, but I get a small commission for referring customers. I want to mention that the Tissot PRX is available with quartz movement here on the left and the automatic self-winding Powermatic 80 movement here on the right. Since the Citizen Tsuyosa is only available as an automatic watch, I'm going to compare it to the automatic Tissot PRX watches, not the quartz models. Although if you consider the price, it might make more sense to compare the Tsuyosa to the PRX quartz models. The Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 is almost 3 times as expensive as the Tsuyosa. In addition, the PRX quartz models usually have a sunburst dial, which is closer to the look of the Tsuyosa watches. But many design differences between the automatic PRX versus the Tsuyosa should be almost identical to the PRX quartz models. I just want to mention that the overall look of the Tsuyosa is closer to the Tissot Gentleman watch collection. I will probably also make a comparison between the Tissot Gentleman and the Tsuyosa. Check my channel if you're interested. It is somewhat difficult to compare the design of the Citizen Tsuyosa to the Tissot PRX because there are so many variations of the Tsuyosa. Here we see 2 different Tsuyosa watches with blue dial and the 40mm PRX Powermatic 80 on the right. So where should we start the comparison? Let's start with the stainless steel bracelet. The wristband of the Tsuyosa is much bulkier and is polished in the center and brushed on the outside. The wristband of the PRX on the right is more flat and thinner and has a stronger brush effect compared to the Citizen Tsuyosa. It looks much more elegant in my opinion. But also notice the clasp of the Tsuyosa compared to the Tissot PRX. The Tsuyosa uses a huge obvious clasp. The Tissot PRX has an almost invisible concealed clasp. Compared to the Citizen watch, it looks much more elegant. If we compare the edges of the watch case outside the bezel diameter, both cases of the Tsuyosa and PRX look to be brushed stainless steel, but again the effect is stronger on the Tissot PRX. If we compare the bezels, the bezel of the Tsuyosa seems to be flatter and wider. The bezel of the Tissot PRX seems more rounded and thinner, less obvious from the front view. Before we talk about the dial, I want to point out the very different crown positions of the Citizen Tsuyosa watches and the Tissot PRX. The Citizen watches have a recessed crown at the 4 o'clock position. The crown of the Tissot PRX watches is at the 3 o'clock position. Okay, then let's talk about the dial. All 3 watches here have a blue dial, but at the same time all 3 dials are very different. On the left you see a sunburst dial. The Tsuyosa in the center has a kind of gradient dial with a wall rendering structured effect, whereas the Tissot has an elegant square waffle pattern. There's not much to say about the logo signature on the dials below the 12 o'clock position. It simply states the names of the 2 brands, while the Tissot also states the year of the founding of the company. Between the center and the 6 o'clock position you can see the word automatic on the Citizen watches. On the Tissot PRX you can see the writing PRX Powermatic 80. If you compare the hour and minute hands, the Tissot PRX seems to have slightly wider hands compared to the Tsuyosa. But if we compare the hour markers, the baton markers of the Citizen watches are much bigger and take up much more space on the dial. The 12 and 6 o'clock position even have 2 baton markers. The index hour markers of the Tissot are much thinner and more elegant in my opinion. The index marker for the 12 o'clock position of the PRX is slightly wider than the other ones, but it's much less obvious compared to the Citizen Tsuyosa watches. Let's compare the date window of the Citizen Tsuyosa versus the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. Most Tsuyosa have a date magnification. Here an example in the center. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of that, but there are some new 2024 models which do not have the magnification, which you can see here on the left. If you compare the date window itself, you can see that the date window of the Citizen watches are very minimalistic. Basically, there's only a square hole cut out of the dial. The date window of the PRX Powermatic 80, however, has a three-dimensional frame around the date. If you look closely, the date window of the Citizen watches cuts off the 3 o'clock hour marker, or rather the 3 o'clock hour marker is just half the size of the other hour markers. For me, it looks like the date window of the Tsuyosa is smaller compared to the Tissot PRX on the right, but maybe it's because of the frame of the date window. In any case, Tissot seems always one day ahead compared to the Citizen watches. I think the chaptering of the Tsuyosa is more vertical compared to a more tapered chaptering of the PRX, but it's not so easy to see clearly here. Obviously, on the dial of the PRX you can see the words Swiss made at the bottom of the dial, which does not appear on the Citizen watches because they are made in Japan, of course. In 2024, Citizen introduced some specialty models with no date magnification. Here on the left, the Tsuyosa with salmon-colored vertical brushed dial. Here in the center, what looks like a green camouflage dial, but I think it's not supposed to be camouflage, but rather a Japanese garden. But I have to say, those models are only supposed to be sold in Europe, so if you are outside of Europe, it might be difficult to acquire those. I thought, since we talk about special models, I show the 42mm Tissot PRX chronograph here on the right, but fair warning, it costs around $1,900 US. Even more interesting are the 2024 Tsuyosa watches with small seconds sub-dial without any date window. The dials are textured with a stamped guilloche-like pattern. It is inspired by Art Deco design. Even the wristbands of these models are different from other Citizen Tsuyosa watches. The center polished links of the wristbands are much wider. With around $370 US, those models are more expensive than the normal Tsuyosa watches. I thought this would be a good opportunity to show a Tissot PRX with 18K gold bezel here in the comparison. Citizen does not offer any real gold models for the Tsuyosa, but Tissot has several two-tone PRX models. Well, actually there is one Tsuyosa watch with gold color. Here on the left we have the Tsuyosa with rose gold colored case and wristband with red gradient dial. The price is not higher than for the other models and the product description just says gold color, so I think there's no real gold involved. On the right we have the full yellow gold PVD coated Tissot PRX with gold champagne dial with a classic waffle pattern. Tissot uses real 1N14 yellow gold for the coating, but it's only an ultra thin layer. So these models cost around $100 US more compared to the normal stainless steel PRX watches. I think I talked enough about the design differences. Let's talk about the technical details and the movement. Let's compare the case of the Citizen Tsuyosa versus the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. The Tsuyosa case has a round shape. According to Tissot, the PRX has a tonneau shape, although I think the shapes look very similar. According to Citizen, the Tsuyosa uses stainless steel for the case. The PRX uses 316L steel, which is supposed to be more corrosion resistant compared to normal stainless steel. Surprisingly, both watches with stainless steel wristband weigh 138 grams, so no difference in weight. If we compare the thickness, it's 11.7 millimeters for the case of the Citizen Tsuyosa and 10.9 millimeters for the case of the automatic Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. The automatic Tissot PRX is slightly thinner. I almost forgot, let's talk about the water resistance. The Citizen Tsuyosa is water resistant only up to 5 bars or 50 meters or 166 feet. The Tissot PRX is water resistant up to 10 bars or 100 meters or 330 feet. It's kind of surprising since Japan is surrounded by water and Switzerland is not, but who's going diving with a dress watch anyway? Both the Citizen Tsuyosa and the Tissot PRX offer open case backs, so you can admire the self-winding movement. So let's compare the movements. Let's start with the power reserve of the Movements. The Tsuyosa has a 40-hour power reserve. The Tissot PRX Powermatic 80, as the name implies, has an 80-hour power reserve if fully wound. So basically the Tsuyosa has half the power reserve of the Tissot. By the way, the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80 has a patented Nivacron balance spring, which is a titanium alloy which is resistant to effects of magnetic fields. If you handle many electronic devices or go through airport checks often, this can be a useful advantage. By the way, the Tissot Gentleman Silicium watches have an even better silicon-based spring, which is even more resistant to electromagnetic fields and temperature changes. Okay, so what about the accuracy of the movement? The Tsuyosa has an accuracy of plus and minus 20 seconds per day. So you might gain or lose up to 20 seconds per day, but this is just the maximum. I could not find official infos about the accuracy of the Tissot PRX, but it is supposed to be around plus and minus 5 to 10 seconds per day. But also measurements in other comparisons of those watches, the Citizen Tsuyosa seems to lose twice as much time as the Tissot PRX. It is very difficult to show any differences of the crystal. Citizen says they use sapphire glass. Tissot calls it scratch-resistant sapphire crystal with the addition of an anti-reflective coating. So overall, the technical specifications of the PRX seem much better compared to the Tsuyosa. But of course, it also costs more than twice as much for the Swiss-made high quality. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel and consider using my shopping links below in the video description. You do not have any downside, but I get a small commission for referring customers, no matter what you buy through my links. I hope this video helped you to choose between the Citizen Tsuyosa and the Tissot PRX Powermatic 80. Which one do you prefer? Will you buy one or the other? Please let me know in the comments.